So over here, in this particular chapter, we talked about ecosystem. Then we talked about the various components of ecosystem, the biotic and abiotic ones, right? The biotic ones are the living things, that is the plants and animals and then microorganisms. And the abiotic components were like sun, water, air, uh, soil, and then ecological factors, right? Like temperature, climate, etc.
For quite some time. We have covered its different types, structure, and also the different food chains and food web.
We will talk about the types of ecosystems in the next chapter, all right? Although it's saying over here in the video, but we will be covering it up in the next chapter, all right? Now, we have done about the food chain. So, sun is the primary source of energy, right? The autotrophs or the primary producers absorb the energy of the sun and convert it into chemical or potential energy by means of photosynthesis, right? These primary producers are eaten up by primary consumers, right? Or the herbivores, which in turn are eaten up by secondary consumers, right? Over here, primary consumer is the worm, and it is consumed by either hen or a frog, which take place of the secondary consumer, right? And the secondary consumer is then consumed by the tertiary consumers. Over here, eagle is the tertiary consumer. So this is one food chain, that is grass, worms, frog, eagle. This is another food chain, grass, worms, hen. Then this is another food chain, grains, hen, and eagle. And then when all these food chains get interlinked, like over here it is given, then it is known as a food web, right? Interlinking of many food chains is food web. We talked about two different types of food webs, right? If you remember, detrital web and grazing web. Grazing web has autotrophs in the beginning as the base of the food chain, while detrital web has detritus, where detritus or the microorganisms, they feed upon the dead remnants of dead tissues, right?
We saw how different organisms in an ecosystem are dependent on one another for their food. If we try to represent this feeding relation in a graphical way, we get a pyramidal structure. This is called the ecological pyramid. Why only pyramid? You might be wondering. Let's understand this. The base of the pyramid is the broadest, with the producers or autotrophs occupying the first position. The remaining organisms or different consumers are arranged above the base. Each bar that makes up the pyramid represents trophic levels or the order in which the organisms eat or are eaten. It also represents the flow of energy. Ecological pyramids are of different types. Based on the flow of energy, the ecological pyramid is always upright.
So we talked about pyramid of energy. That is, the producers produce like they trap the energy of the sun and produce a large amount of energy. Then, as this energy passes up the levels, the amount of energy transferred gets reduced each time. Why? Because some of the energy is lost into the environment every time it is transferred as heat, right? So the amount of energy keeps decreasing as we go up the levels. Okay.
The energy flow from one organism to another in a linear way, and only 10% of the energy actually moves from one trophic level to another. The remaining gets lost in the surrounding. The next type of pyramid is the pyramid of numbers. What actually is number here? It is the number of organisms in each trophic level. In this pyramid, the most abundant organism occupies the base and the least abundant ones occupies the apex of the pyramid. Just consider the lake ecosystem. The producers or diatoms occupy the base of the pyramid as they are most abundant in number. The second trophic level is zooplanktons, which is comparatively less in number, or other primary consumers. The third level is occupied by small fishes or the secondary consumers. And finally, the apex of the pyramid is occupied by larger fishes, which are lesser in number.
So as we move up the pyramid, the number of organisms present in each level keeps decreasing. That is, the producers are present in a wide scale, right? For example, the grass would be in abundance. The number of deer present in that area would be lesser than the amount of grass present. Then the number of lions or cheetahs would be further less than the number of the grazing animals. Why this is done? To balance the ecosystem, because if, like for example, small fishes over here had been 10 and the zooplanktons had been only 2, then these 10 fishes would quickly eat up the 2 zooplanktons, and then what would happen next, right? So the balance of the ecosystem would get disturbed, and so the number of organisms as we move up the trophic level keeps decreasing, right? And so we get an erect pyramid if we represent this number of organisms graphically, right?
But this is not always the case. The pyramid of numbers is not always upright. Just consider a tree ecosystem. A single oak tree can host a large number of caterpillars. The caterpillars provide food for several blue tits that in turn are eaten by sparrowhawk. Now check the structure of the pyramid. This is a partially inverted pyramid, or more like a spindle, isn't it? Now, here is a completely inverted pyramid of numbers. The parasitic ecosystem. A single large host can be home to different parasites, which in turn acts as food for much abundant trophic levels of hyperparasites. The third type of pyramid is the pyramid of biomass. What is biomass, you might ask? Mass is the weight of something. So, biomass is the total weight of living matter per unit area of an ecosystem. Let's understand this further. The total biomass of grass eaten by a herbivore is more as compared to the amount of flesh eaten by the secondary consumer or carnivore when it eats that herbivore. This indicates that the pyramid of biomass can be upright. It gradually reduces with each trophic level. Now consider a marine ecosystem. The large-sized fishes depends on tiny-sized zooplanktons, which in turn depends on much tinier phytoplanktons, thus showing an inverted pyramid of biomass. So to summarize, we saw the 3 different types of pyramids, which graphically represents the different trophic levels and also shows the efficiency of an ecosystem and the functioning. So that's it for today's.
So in this chapter, we learned about what is ecology, what is an ecosystem, what are the components of ecosystem, that is the autotrophic and heterotropic, that was based on like from the functional point of view. Then from the structural point of view, it was divided into biotic and abiotic components. Biotic components had the living and living organisms, that is plants, animals, and microbes. Abiotic contained macronutrients, micronutrients, inorganic substances, and ecological factors, right? Then we talked about the functions of the ecosystem, that is the production, consumption, and decomposition. Then the functional aspects of ecosystem were energy flow, that is energy flow is unidirectional in nature, and then cycle of nutrients, that is the nutrients keep circulating between the living and non-living components of an ecosystem. We took the example of carbon cycle, right? And we discussed it in detail. Then we talked about food chain, right? And the various trophic levels, that is primary producers, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and then decomposers and retrievers working at various levels, right? Then we talked about food web, right? And the difference between grazing web and detrital web, right? Grazing web has the autotrophs at the base of the food chain, while detrital web are based around detritus, or the remnants of dead organisms, where we did the example of mangrove forest, that is the bacteria and protozoa, they feed on the dead leaves of the mangrove trees, right? And then the food chain continues with the lower level organisms consuming this colony of microorganisms, right? Then we did certain examples, and then finally the ecological pyramids, pyramid of numbers. As we move up the level, the number of organisms present in each level decreases, right? Sometimes we also get an inverted pyramid when we talk about one thing supporting the life of many other organisms. Like one tree has many birds living on it. These birds further have many parasites living on their body, which in turn support many hyperparasites on their bodies, right? Then pyramid of biomass, we got two pyramids once again, where when we talked about terrestrial ecosystem, it was an erect pyramid, and talking about a marine ecosystem, we got an inverted pyramid. The pyramid diagrams are very important. You people don't pay attention, like I had said about the poverty and ecological environmental degradation, that when you talk about the relation between the two, make that chart diagram that was given, make that chart, but still many of you did not make the diagram, and you have cost your marks for that. So remember to make the these diagrams when you talk about the ecological pyramids, right? Then we have pyramid of energy, that is, as we go up the level, the energy transfer keeps decreasing. Only 10% of the energy gets absorbed by the body of the organism in the next level. Now you have to learn these key terms, and we move on to the exercises. Define the following terms: food chain, food web, and trophic level. So you have the definitions given, right? In your chapter itself, you can pick up the definition of the food chain from page 46. I'll just tell you the location. You people have to form the answers on your own, because I've already made you underline while discussing the chapter, so I won't be reading it out once again. What happened, Neha? Feeling sleepy? You have to get up early in the morning, no? So now food web you will get on page 48 under the heading food web, and trophic level you will get on page 47, right? Obviously, you will have to talk about a little bit about the various trophic levels, right? You can just maybe give one line because it's a short type question. No need to explain in detail. Then biogeochemical cycle you will get on page 45 under cycle of nutrients. What are the two divisions of ecosystem from the functional point of view? So from functional point of view, Gauri, would you be able to tell me? Two divisions of ecosystem, it's given on page 43. Yes, Madhya?
Ma'am, I want to ask that the definitions in the first question, can we write it from the key terms when the three definitions are given?
Yes, sure. You can pick up from the key terms, fine. But they are like given in very short, all right? So you cannot just write that much and leave. You will have to add some things to it, all right? Because even if it's a 2-mark question, you should at least write 2 to 3 lines. So just this much is not sufficient, right? You can pick up the main definition from here and then add certain things to it, all right? Yes, Ananya, answer. Two divisions of ecosystem from functional point of view.
Ma'am, from functional point of view, each ecosystem can be divided into two components that are autotrophic component and heterotrophic. Ma'am, do
All
you need
right,
to
good.
explain also?
No need to explain. It's a short type. If it is of 3 marks, then you will explain. If it's of 2 marks, then no need to explain. Then what are the two divisions of ecosystem from structural point of view?
Ma'am, abiotic component and biotic component.
All right, fine. Then next, what are the two functional aspects of ecosystem? Functional aspects. Yes, Shambhavi.
Energy flow and cycle of nutrients.
All right, fine. If it's a 2 marks, then fine, you can write and leave. But please add this line that the two functional aspects of ecosystem are, and then you will give the two aspects. But if it's a 3 mark, then you will have to explain. The flow of energy is unidirectional. Explain the statement. The flow of energy is unidirectional. Explain. Purva.
Ma'am, the flow of energy is unidirectional because when the solar energy is trapped by the chlorophyll, then it cannot retrace the path, and that is
Very good.
retrace the path back to the sun. That is why the energy passed to the consumers and the decomposer cannot be retraced their path back.
Very good. Very good. Fine. What are macro and micronutrients? Give example. Who would answer this? Skand, answer this. What are micro and macronutrients? You will get this on page 43 at the bottom of the page. Start from there. What happened? You couldn't find it. Page 43 at the bottom of the page.
Ma'am, micronutrients are the elements that are required in large quantity, for example, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, etc.
Then micro. Right after that, in continuation with it.
Micronutrients are the nutrients that required in small amounts. They include elements like copper, manganese,
Fine.
selenium.
All right. So you had to give examples also. So this is the definition and then the examples. Good. Then we come to long answer type. So explain carbon cycle with illustrations. So you have the entire cycle given from page 45 to page 46. You will have to make the diagram and you will have to explain. Now this will be up to you how you pick up the points and form the answer so that it's not like very short, it's not very long, and it provides all the necessary details. All right. So it will be up to you how well you form the answer from the given data. Compare and contrast grazing web and detrital web. Give examples for both types of food chain. Right. So you have this given on page 48. You can define both the webs, give example, and then explain that example on your own. You will have to explain that example also. All right. Then explain the following with suitable diagrams. So pyramid, the 3 pyramids we have already done. You will define, you will talk about it in detail, and you will make the diagram. This ends the chapter from your book. Then you have your workbook questions. So 2 functional components of ecosystem we've done. Flow of energy is unidirectional. We've done what is food web, what are its 2 types. We've done what are biotic components of an ecosystem. So you can talk about it. Just the biotic components, right? So page 44. Yasharth Yadav, answer this from page 44. What are biotic components of an ecosystem? I'm even telling you the page number. Go to the heading and tell.
And biotic components include the living element of the ecosystem.
All right.
Ma'am, and abiotic also.
No. Talk about the biotic only in detail, na?
Each biotic components community comprises of producer, consumer, and decomposers. Producers are the green plant which synthesize food for all the living organisms directly or indirectly.
All right. Then consumers.
The consumers are those living organisms that cannot produce their own food and obtain it from the producers.
All right. Now come to decomposers.
Decomposers are microorganisms, mostly bacteria, fungi, protozoa, etc.
All right. Fine. It's fungi, not fungi. It's fungi.
Yes.
All right. And you can add that they decompose the dead plants and animals and break them into simpler compounds. You will have to at least explain this much, because I know such a question would come at least of 3 marks, not less than that. So you will talk about that they are like 3 plants, animal producers, consumers, and decomposers, and then you will talk one line about each. Right? Then what is food chain? Explain the elements of food chain with example. Now you will have to talk about the food chain, and elements of food chain would be the primary producers, primary consumers, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and decomposers. So you will have to explain each of them, right? Like on page 46, the food chain has been described, like, right? Neha, can you tell me? From page 46, just don't read the definition, just tell me that how will you explain the elements of food chain. Wait, Gauri, let Neha answer. Na, she was lost somewhere, that is why I asked her. Let her get her attention back. What happened, Neha? It's on page 44. I'm telling you.
Ma'am, what is
Page.
the question?
Explain the elements of food chain with example. The elements of food chain would be primary producers, primary consumers, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and then decomposers. So how will you form the answer? Explain the elements of food chain with example. How will you form the answer for this? All right, Gauri. Gauri will start jumping in a minute. Let me ask her. But Neha, pay attention. Listen to what she has to say.
Ma'am, the process of being eaten and eaten in an ecosystem is called food chain. And the first stage of the food chain is the energy source, that is the sun. Second
Mhm.
is the primary source, that is eaten by the primary consumer. The primary source includes grass and other fruits and vegetables eaten by the animals like grasshopper and ants, and these primary consumer is being eaten by the secondary consumer like lizard or something rapid, and these secondary consumer is being eaten by the territory consumer when they are dead.
Tertiary.
Sorry ma'am, tertiary consumer when they are dead.
Not when they are dead. They are eaten up like that only. All right. You have not seen an eagle hunting? Not dead. They eat like not necessary. Sometimes they eat dead animals, but most of the times they hunt in eat.
Ma'am,
All
then
right.
what about crow?
They also eat living tissues. It's not that always they are going to eat dead remains only. All right.
Okay, ma'am.
Fine. It's not that they always eat the dead animals, but yes, their job is to clear the earth of the waste and dead remnants, right? So, but still, they eat the living organisms also. They catch these rats and mice, small ones, and they eat those, right? Okay, fine. You took up an example and then you explained each one in detail, right? When you talk about the producers, please talk about that they trap the energy of the sun and convert it into chemical energy, right? Then describe carbon cycle. This you will do on your own. Then what is a detrital web? Explain what are food, right? A food chain or for forest and pond ecosystem. Now, this is something that you have to do on your own. So who can give me one example for forest ecosystem? Like in a forest ecosystem, what can be a food chain? And in a pond ecosystem? Give me examples for this. Irna, give me an example for the forest ecosystem. Example of food chain in a forest ecosystem. Sanskar, by then you think of a pond ecosystem. Irna will answer and then you will answer for. Irna, unmute.
Ma'am, in a forest, the plants are eaten by deer and the deer eaten by the lion.
All right, fine, but this was a very small one. You could have think of a larger, at least when you are giving example of a food chain, at least go up till tertiary. All right, don't leave it to secondary. Ishanvi, would you give me an example that has up till tertiary level?
Ma'am, plants are eaten by rabbit, rabbit is eaten by fox, and fox is eaten by lion.
All right, but fox are not eaten by a lion. They are very clever. They escape each time. All right, it's not easy for a lion to catch the fox, but fine, I'll accept it. But in your exam, think of better example and give. Yes, Sanskar, give me an example for pond ecosystem. Pond ecosystem. What happened? It's so easy. You have to just talk about the fishes. No need to name the fishes. You can just say small ones, larger ones. Come on.
Man, we should save the small fishes so that ecosystem will not be manipulated.
Repeat.
Man, we should need to save the small fishes.
I cannot understand what you're saying. Tawheed, you try.
Yes, ma'am.
Give me an example of a food chain in a pond ecosystem. What will you people do if there are questions in which you have to frame the answers on your own? You can't form just one food chain. It's so easy. What are the organisms found in a pond? Sure.
Yes, ma'am. Grass is eaten by cricket, and cricket is eaten by frog, and frog is eaten by snake.
Child, cricket is an organism of a pond.
Ma'am, it sometimes sits on plants that float.
No, no, no. You have to talk about the organisms that live in a pond. You have to talk about the pond ecosystem that is inside a pond. Pond ecosystem is where? Where would you find pond ecosystem? Inside the pond, right?
Yes.
Crickets do not live in a pond. Mimansha?
Ma'am, ma'am, first there will be the marine algae, and marine algae is being eaten by starfish. Starfish can be eaten by a shark.
Shark in a pond? Mimansha, you were smiling at the others and now you've like given a
Not
very nice.
because Sanskar was saying that we should save small fishes so that they cannot be eaten by large fishes. That's why I was laughing.
But sharks in a pond, my God. Bhumi, come on, answer. Let me proceed further.
Ma'am, are eaten by small fish, and then small fish are eaten by big fish.
You people will write one food chain for the forest ecosystem, one for the pond ecosystem, and you will answer this in the next class. I won't be giving you the answer for this. All right. This is your homework. I will not proceed further unless you give me examples for both the ecosystems. Right. All right. Now explain the pyramid of energy. Then you will do this. Then what is the trophic level? What does it indicate? So you will talk about trophic level from page 47. Then pyramid of numbers. What does it indicate? In what case, like you get an inverted pyramid, so you have to talk about it. Both the pyramids, that is inverted and the upright one, from page 49. Right? The entire explanation is given from 49 to page 50. Right? So you will do that. How does the food chain and trophic level help in framing the food pyramid? Right? So how food chain, this food pyramid is formed, like the food chain, you have the various trophic levels, and then when it is represented graphically, then we get the food pyramid, right? So this you will get from page 49 under the heading ecological pyramids. All right, you will have to explain it on your own. Listen to it very carefully, that in a food chain, as we move to the different trophic levels, whether the energy is getting transferred or whether we are talking about the number of organisms, when it is represented graphically, we get a pyramid, right? As we move up the trophic level, when we represent it, the transfer of energy or the number of organisms, as we move up the trophic level and we represent it graphically, then we get a pyramid, right? So this is the answer for this. You will get help from page 49 under the heading ecological pyramid. You can explain in your own words and form the answer. All right. So like this question and the other question where you had to give examples of food chain, you will form those, and this will be your homework. You will solve these two questions and I will listen to it in the next class. All right. So this brings us to the So now you've been given an inverted pyramid. What does the diagram show, right? And then, so this is pyramid of biomass. In which kind of ecosystem can we observe this? So you can see that this is an aquatic ecosystem, right? This can be a pond ecosystem. This can be a like river ecosystem. So that also would come under pond ecosystem only. So this is an example of pond ecosystem food chain. You've got this, you've take this as an example. I will not accept this food chain if you tell me as the answer. All right. So explain why is the diagram inverted. So you will explain that on your own, right? Go to the pyramid of biomass, look for the reason and explain. Write the food chain for the given diagram. So instead of the pyramid, you have to form the food chain and write it. So what will become? Algae, arrow, crustacean, arrow, small fish, arrow, large fish. This will be the food chain. Write the food chain where the diagram would be upright. So this is an example of inverted pyramid. So you have to give now an example where you can get a erect pyramid, an erect pyramid, right? So you have to give another example. This brings us to the end of the chapter. That will be all, right?